mat in that room next to where we were at just now. There's a mat on the floor, a rubber mat, and on one side of the mat there's this little design in it. So I found just things in the classroom to create textures on each side of my slab. There's even another texture on the bottom. So the easiest way to make, in the case of a box like this where you have a six-sided shape, the easiest thing to do rather than measure each piece of clay is to use a template. In other words, this piece of cardboard is for this shape, the top of the box, and this piece of cardboard is for each end on the box. So it's very easy to just lay these on rather than measure and cut everything, separately. So I'll take my template, I'm going to lay it on here, I'll take my pin tool. When I cut with my pin tool, I want to hold the pin tool, I don't want to angle it this way or that way. I want to create a 90-degree angle between the side of the slab and the top of the slab. It's okay if I angle it this way, I just don't want to angle it back or forth that way. So I'm going to hold it against the cardboard upright like this.
So question.
Yes.
So with the legs of the box, is that kind of like a free-form thing, like since you didn't have like a template or whatever?
Well, that's true. Actually, what I did was I had a ruler sitting like that ruler on the table, and I laid that ruler and just cut a strip out with the ruler, and then I turned the ruler 90 degrees and then cut little squares out. So in other words, these little feet are just basic little squares, and I used something like a ruler just to cut out squares. So, and then I sandwiched one on top of the other, so it's two thicknesses of clay for the feet on there. I like the idea of feet on a box or on pieces in general because it gives it more height, and it creates a visual break between the surface of the table and the actual box. Now, like I said, I would cut these ideally. When I made that box, I actually made the slabs a day ahead of time, and I let them not sit out, but I put them on my wear board and covered it with plastic, and then I put another board on top of it. So they, again, when they dry out, they don't warp. And then I made the box. Actually, it was the easiest box I've ever made because, you see right now, see my slabs, the clay is soft, and as I pick it up, it starts to actually change its shape. It's no longer as square. And actually, it's easier to cut your clay when it's a little bit drier. And it's the same with hot wood. If you've ever worked with wood, you know that hardwoods actually are easier to cut than softwoods. Softwoods have a tendency to splinter, right? Like pine is a big pain, but something like walnut is a harder wood, and it's so much easier to cut. So that would be another sort of an analogy. What's an analogy? Right. Yeah, you're comparing two things, saying, like apples and oranges, right? It's like apples and oranges. Even though the apples and oranges are two different things. I'm not sure with that. Now, all these little scraps, I'll save these. So later on, if I want to put a handle, or if I want to put feet, or anything else, I'll use my scraps. Now I'm going to cut. So I have my two ends, and now I'm going to cut. How many pieces do I need altogether? Altogether. Six, that's right. So
I have a question.
Yes.
Instead of putting that cardboard right against the edge of what you already have, why do you have a little space?
Like this here?
Yeah.
I don't know. I felt like this wasn't quite even. Like when I put this cardboard on right now that little edge there is a little off. So that's all. I feel like I get a better, a straighter cut than if I put it right up against the edge. I could, I suppose, but I always feel like I give myself a little leeway. But that's a good question, and I guess I wouldn't have to do that if I was more careful. But right now, let's say right now this edge is a little uneven because I cut one piece here and one piece there, so if I put up against the edge, I'll have a little unevenness there. So rather than do that, I'll give myself that little extra, so I cut off the little imperfection, I guess, that I created for myself. Maybe if I line these up differently, I wouldn't have to do that. Another thing I like to do when I make my box, I like to make them on a small little board like this. That way I can move the board around. I'm not always picking the box up to work on. I just move the board around. So I might see if there might be one in the back of the room. But again, it's easier if you can not pick your box up so much when you're working on it. So that goes to the basic idea. When you're making slabs, the less you handle the slabs, the less distorted they're going to become. In other words, every time I pick a piece of clay up and it's soft like this, it changes its shape. And also I leave little fingerprints in it. So if I can handle it less, it's actually better. So a lot of times I'll put it, like I say, I'll put my pieces on another wear board, a smaller wear board. Or sometimes the back of a plaster mold, that looks nice. It's nice and flat. And plaster, the beauty of plaster and clay is clay doesn't stick to plaster. So if you're making a box and it's sticking to whatever you're working on, then if you work on plaster, it won't stick to it. So I like to work on top of plaster, a little plaster. It's like the wear board, except it's made of plaster. There's some downstairs. I'm going to bring the one we have downstairs because when you reclaim your clay, you reclaim it. In other words, you dry out your clay by putting it on plaster because plaster has an affinity for water, and that's why the clay doesn't stick to it. Now I did make some slip. Remember I took some dry clay and I put it in that yogurt container yesterday and I put water in, and now it's dissolved into a paste. And that's actually, I think, more ideal to use than water when it comes to gluing your pieces together, scoring and slipping them together. Because again, the slip stays where you put it, where water doesn't. The water will go, kind of moves around, it runs all over your piece, it keeps it wet than it needs to be, but the slip will stay where you put it. So I'm going to make my box on here. I'll start with my first slab, I'll lay it here. Now again, as I'm moving it around, it's actually changing its shape a little bit, so sometimes I'll take this rib. This is another rib, by the way. Ribs come in all different shapes and sizes. So I'll just kind of eyeball it and screw it up a little bit. And this is something I purchased recently, and this is so nice. I can't believe how nice this is. This is a little device for cutting 45-degree corners or edges into your slabs. It used to be I would just take my slab, my serrated rib, and do this and gouge it down, but it was never very perfect or exact. But this thing cuts a perfect 45-degree angle, because what I'm going to do eventually is put my slabs together like this. Now the first boxes I used to make, I used to just do it this way. I would butt one piece onto another. But that, if you imagine doing that, then it changes the shape of your box. In other words, with the dimensions of it. See, if I add this on here, it's no longer it's no longer 6 inches, it's 6 inches plus. Or if I put it up here, it's no longer 4 inches, it's 4 inches plus. So by putting a 45-degree edge or corner into it, and you put these together, it creates a nice, it keeps your box the size of your template. So I'll take this is 30-60, this side is 30-60, and this side is 45 degrees, so I'm going to stick with the 45. And I'll pull it up against my slab and pull it towards me like this. And just that easy, I cut a nice 45-degree angle into my slab. And this is what I'm talking about. If you can work on top of the board, so I just have to move the board. I don't have to pick my slab up, because if I do, it's going to change its shape. And, I won't get the perfect box I'm looking for. This is quite nice. I just bought this. This is the only one I have, so we're going to have to share. I should buy another one. These are so nice to have. So if I ever lose this one or wear it out, I'll have another one. All right, so there's the base of my piece, and I'm going to cut out. Doesn't matter. I can put an end on it. Or I'll just put one of these on it. And I'll do the same with this one. Then I'll cut out my 45-degree. Maybe I'll do it over here. I'll cut out my 45-degree corners or edges. And then I'm going to score and slip it onto that piece. Now again, you're making a box sort of to practice. This is just to practice making things out of slabs, because when we start our projects, or our project, you're going to be using maybe all or at least one of these basic hand building techniques. So this is your little assignment just to kind of learn how to use slabs. So there's my slip. It's a little watery on top, so I'll pour off the excess water. And, I haven't said this, but don't put any clay in the sink. The sinks downstairs are clogged. It got clogged up. Not because of us, mind you, but there was another program down there where they were a mess. So they clogged up the sink because they used the one sink on one end of the classroom, and that was the one that got clogged up. So I'm going to put some slip on my rib. I'm going to score and slip the edge like that. I'm going to do all 4 edges.
Can you move the cup? Thank you.
And I'm scoring and slipping all 4 sides because when I start to put my slabs on here, it's hard to get into the corner. So I like to do it now, and then I'll do that with this one as well. And this clay is pretty plastic. Again, I would prefer it wasn't so soft, but yeah, it'll be fine. It'll still work.
And with the slip, is it more like a dip, or do you like scoop it?
Well, I just dip it in there. You can see what the consistency is. See, it's kind of like yogurt or cottage cheese or something. See, I just dip it in there. And then I'll take my slab, I'll butt it up against this one like that, and then I'll fold it up like so, and I get that nice, look at that, beautiful, isn't it? Tell you. I mean, I've made boxes for years where, you know, you make these corners, and they're never really perfect because of my methods, but it does it just perfectly. And then I'll take this, well, there's 2 things. I'm going to take this, and I'm going to make sure I'm getting good surface contact between my slabs. So I'm going to pat this in just a little bit softly and easily. And then I'm going to take this little tool and run it into the corner and make sure I'm getting good, again, good surface contact, nice clean corner in there. There we go. And then I'll put my next piece on. So I'll take one of my ends and cut my corners or edges. I'll probably try to buy another one of these so we have a couple of them. And you can see I just dip it in there like that. That's enough slip on there. Up against here like that, line it up, and push it up there. And then I'll take my rib and get a little pat on the edges to make sure my seams are coming together on the outside, and then run this up on the inside like that. Work the clay into the corner. So the tool I'm using, it has a nice tip on it, but the tip is not real sharp. Its tip is slightly rounded, in other words, which is nice. Some of these trimming sticks have a point on them. I don't like using those because it's too pointed. All right. The class I teach at Lills Creek, I have a clay class I teach there. It's called The Art of the Box. And so that class is just about making boxes. And those boxes can come in all different shapes and sizes. They don't always have to be rectangular or square. But these are the easiest boxes to make. Another way I like to make boxes, I like to make a mold. I'll make a slab, put some design into it, and then I'll make a mold of it. I'll make a plaster mold of it. And then all you have to do is push your clay into the plaster mold and it'll take that shape. So you can do a really intricate, you can spend a few days doing a really intricate design on your slab and then make a mold of it. And then you don't have to reproduce that design every time you want that design. You just push your clay into your mold and then you have it. So I've done that in order to make boxes. You can make molds of different things too. This slab, let me turn this around. This will make it easier for me to get to. I lined it up. I know you can't see it, don't you? But you get the idea. And also, again, as I move my slabs around, they'll lose their shape a little bit, but that's all right. I'll look at it and tap it back into 90 degrees. I always like to have two of everything in front of me, two pin tools, two ribs, because I'll put one down and I'm like, where did it go? Now I guess you can use, I brought some templates with me. I have, in this baggie I have, several different size templates. So for this project, I'm going to say you don't need to make your own template unless you want to. If you have a specific size you want to make your box, then you can make your own template. You can even just make it out of paper. But cardboard you can use over and over again, or mat board. This is a sort of a standard size box that I make. And I probably have a dozen of this size boxes around my studio. But every time I make a box, I try to also change the something about it. I'll either put a different kind of foot on it or a different kind of lid. I'll always try to change things. So I'm not making the exact same box over and over again. So the last time I made this box, which was last Friday for my box class, I have it standing end on end like this, and I put round feet on it. I've never put round feet on something. So they said, well, so I like that I did always doing something different. That way you're trying different ideas out. Once you learn something, and you got it, why not try something a little different? Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but it's always, you're always getting yourself to learn new stuff. Alright, now I have my last piece to put on here, which is the lid. The lid's probably the trickiest part. So if I just put the lid on there, the lid will collapse. It'll sink in. So what I'm going to do is glue the box with some tape. That, let's get the column on the screen and get it out of the position. There you go. get some paper towel. I'll be back in 30 seconds. You can count. Oh, there, 20,000.
Really counting?
Alright, so I'm going to take this paper and stuff it in here. And when I stuff, I'm pushing it down. If I push it out, my box might fall apart. So I'm going to stuff it down. And also, you really want to fill, you really have to fill your box with paper. In other words, it can't just sort of be like this, because the weight of the clay will push it down. So you got to make sure it's, at some point, it's going to support the weight of anything you put on top of your piece of clay that you're going to put on top of it. So I keep pushing it down until actually it sticks up a little bit. In other words, so I'd rather there be too much paper in here than not enough, in other words. Because if there's too much, that's easier to deal with. I can always, when I take the lid off, I can always push the lid down if it's bulging up a little bit. Now the last piece I put on there, once I think I have enough, I like to fold it so it's flat like that, so it supports the slab on top of it. So I might do several pieces like that. Is that enough? I think so. I'll take my last piece. Bevel my edges. And then score and slip them. And then put it on top. Now I have a number of other decisions I can make at this point. Like, do I want to put a handle on it? Do I want to put feet on it? And the most challenging decision for me is always, how do I want to cut it apart? So I'm completely sealing the box together, right? But I found this is the best way to make a box and make sure the lid is going to fit later on. Because it's all fits together right now. Rather than making the lid as a separate thing and then trying to make it fit, I find that that's sort of a hit or miss. But now that I've completely put this whole box together, I'm going to cut the lid off of it. That way, the lid will be sure to fit. Does that make sense? Oh, look at that. See, I hit my hand on the edge of it. I messed my whole box. I got to start all over. That's the thing, this clay is so soft, it's easy to dangle a little bit. But that's all right. It'll add some character to the box. You know, the Japanese, they like to actually allow little imperfections to occur in their pieces. And that way, I feel those little imperfections actually add to the individual character of the pieces. They make so no two pieces are alike in other words. And they have a technique of firing things called raku that creates all these cracks in the surface of the piece, and the cracks are never the same. So it's kind of like snowflakes are never the same. So it kind of creates this individual characteristic for each piece that they make. All right, so there we go. There I have, we could call it a cube, or not a cube, but a rectangular box. So I'm going to switch, I'm going to flip it over and then make sure all the seams are coming together. and decide which side I like the least and put that as the bottom. So the top I just put on there. See, isn't that a nice, that looks nice as the top because it's nice and flat as opposed to the last piece I put on. So that piece I put on, I'm going to flip this over and make that the bottom of the box because that has a little more imperfections than I care for. You know, it's not as flat as even. So this will become the top of my box. Now I have to decide, like I say, how I want to cut it apart. And you can see what I did with this one. I just cut this sort of, you know, shape out of it. You know, no particular, just that's what I decided to do. Now, if I cut the top straight across, which I could just cut it straight like this. Then I have to create another device to hold the lid in place. See, by cutting it like this, I actually keyed the lid into the bottom. So it only fits one way, but those little cuts make the lid fit, right? One way and one way only, but it sits on there and it doesn't move around. So if I cut my lid like this, I'll have to add some little device to hold the lid in place. Does that make sense? Because you don't want your lid just sliding around on top of your box. So I've made, you know, so it depends. At the moment I don't have any brilliant ideas about cutting the lid off. In fact, probably what I should do is let the box rest. See, if I cut the lid off now because the clay's so wet, the clay's gonna, it'll change its shape. In other words, if I cut a lid off, it'll kind of mess, it won't fit as well. So instead what I'll do is I'll put some feet on this, and maybe I'll put a handle on it. I don't know if we want to go that far with these or not. We just, how much do we want to do to these? We're just sort of, it's just basically practice pieces, right? So make your basic box. If you want to put, I'll show you how to put a foot or a handle on it, and then if you decide you want to, but you don't have to if you don't want to, if you have time to. So this is going to be the bottom, as I said earlier. So what I'll do is I'll take a ruler, it's too wide, and I'm going to cut, you know, some strips out that I'm going to make a foot out of. So